So you want to be a dungeon master?
That's great. We're here to help. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Justin. This week, we're talking about the grand design of the universe. Wait, no, we're not. Sorry about our sorry. Our scriptwriter seems to have made a mistake. Oh, wait a minute. This episode is about mistakes? Whoa. Dang, gang. That was deep.
Anyway, we're talking about the top 5 common mistakes made by new DMs. We asked our Discord and over on TikTok and Instagram. We consulted Bing. We came up with the list of 5 in no particular order.
And let's be clear. Some of these mistakes are not that big of a deal at all. These are common, right? So don't feel bad or discouraged if you made one of these or even all 5 of these mistakes. Some of these just come down to personal style also, whether that's play style or like previous experience or what you enjoy out of the game. So, hey, we're just having fun here, and hopefully these help some people out. And if you feel like it doesn't apply to you and you're cool with it, then hey, let her rip.
Yeah.
Let her rip. But let's get into it.
But first,
I was going to be first. What's a mistake that you used to make? And how did you kind of like find out that it was a mistake? Like, did somebody was like, Taylor, you're making a mistake? Or like, did you just know inherently, like, by the consequences? And did you learn anything from it, switch it up?
Right. So since this question has been written, I've been kind of mulling it about. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I feel like I made, it was a compound bunch of bullshit. But what wound up happening is I had let a new player join and play a class that I was not familiar with, namely Druid. And I made it a super high level encounter. Like, I was like a level 15 encounter. So like it was like a adult red dragon or something like that. And so I had like, basically we did like, it was basically a one shot, like a high level one shot. With a player that didn't have a whole very firm grasp on the rules, and at the time I was a very fresh DM, so one thing led to another. I let her wild shape into a kraken, man. Like, I let it happen, and she absolutely demolished the encounter. So, but I think. Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake I made, though, was allowing the mechanic without fully reading the spell text. Like, you know, it's okay to not know the rules, but you need to, when the rule comes into play, you should take a couple of seconds to actually read the spell text, because otherwise you're gonna have a kraken on your field, and you're not gonna know how to scale for a kraken, because the fight is not scaled for that at all.
Yeah, and krakens are no joke. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a cool moment that player probably never forget,
and I was kind of okay with it, because it was a one shot. It didn't really matter too much, and I was like, all right, fine. I just kind of made a ruling on it in the moment, and then went back and read the spell text of Wild Shape, and I was like, oh, that shouldn't have happened.
Yep. Yeah, that's Kraken's not a beast.
That's not a beast.
CR this or lower.
Yep. Oh boy.
Double digit.
But it was
CR,
fun. Everybody had a good time.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
That is all that matters. Yeah. And I guess you quote unquote learned from that mistake by knowing what Wild Shape does now.
Mm-hmm. I have a very firm grasp on Wild Shape and how all the little nooks and crannies of it, for the most part.
Yeah. For the most part, Druids. But that's a good one. That's a really fun one.
Yeah.
Especially during a one shot is a great time to make mistakes.
Yeah. That's why I definitely recommend new budding DMs run one shots to start off with, because you'll learn a whole lot over that couple hour session.
Yeah.
And then you can come back the next time and be like, hey guys, so went back, reviewed the footage. We're going to need to make some changes at the table. And then that just kind of leads into, like, nobody feels like the character that they've made is getting shortchanged.
Right.
because then you'll come back to it with like a, hey, okay, so now we know this and this needs to be a little bit stricter. Maybe that changes some mechanics for some people. So let's just make some new characters and give it another go.
Yeah. Yeah, next time you play with those players, just let them know, like, hey, if anyone's playing a druid, technically you can't be a Kraken. It was super fun in that game, but I don't know if I'll allow that again.
Right, exactly.
Love the hustle.
Yeah, because it was.
And it's kind of one of those that, hey, if you're the DM, if you're listening to this and you're like, but I want to let them become a Kraken every time, hey,
then do it.
Go for it.
Yeah, like, just know you're going to have to scale for a Kraken. Like,
it is, yeah. It does come some challenge to it, unless you're unless it's all RP and you're like, what's the RP like with a Kraken?
Dear God, it's coming on shore.
Let's do it. Who knows? Maybe we're wrong about the whole Kraken thing. Another mistake. Anyway, for me, I think a mistake that I've made is, there's so few.
Okay. Sure.
There's so few. I think a mistake that I've made is probably like, I'm a big generosity person of like, I end up giving out so many loot, magic items, different abilities, all kinds of stuff, to where I've had to learn how to balance for this particular party where I've made these mistakes, and I need to overscale all of the combats in order for them to be challenging in the slightest, and then play a game with other players who don't get all those things, and forgetting to scale back. Being like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't the group that can take on the dragon. Oh, no. The dragons. Oh, no.
Oh, you heard it enough. It flies away now. It's leaving.
Exactly. There's so many ways to do it. And, yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to the experience. I don't think that there was any, like, one simple trick of being like, now I know how to balance things better, right? It was just like over time being like, I guess like the easiest trick when it comes to like specifically, I guess we'll get into it later when we get into our five common mistakes for a new DM to make. Now, like Taylor said at the top, these come in from Discord and TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. We made a video asking for these, and the people responded with so many different ones. There's too many to mention. But that's the thing, is like the most important ones, or at least the ones that we feel should be recognized and also like are actually pretty common, are on this list. And we're being a little vague about it, but let's flip and talk about it.
Let's flip and talk about it, man.
Let's flip and talk about it. First on the list, we have new DMs feeling like they have to know everything. Somebody hasn't run the game yet, but maybe has played in it, maybe has watched an actual play, maybe has some preconceived notion that in order to run the game, you have to be an expert. And you have to know everything.
Not so, says I.
Not so, says I.
I feel like we've been preaching this since the episode 1 in as far as this one. Like, I think the rules are something that you can pick up as you go, as I talked about earlier with the Kraken. Like, you know, it's okay to just make a ruling in the moment and then go back, but make sure you go back.
Yeah.
There is that. So like, you going into it, you don't have to know everything, but as you go along, if you're not learning anything, you should be, you know, taking a look at your DM style and make sure that, you know, you're running it by the book. Unless, you know, you're not really caring about that, then, you know, that's a whole nother thing. But if you are concerned about the rules, I would be taking a look at kind of some of the rulings that you made in the previous session and be like, okay, was that right? You know, I do it almost every time I end a session. I at least mentally go over the whole session and be like, okay, was that a good ruling? You know, was there anything that felt weird in the moment? And, you know, eventually it gets to be less and less, you know?
Yeah.
But there's always, almost every session, going to be something that pops up that is, you know, ooh, I don't know. I'm going to rule on it this way, and then we'll discuss it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that idea of hitting the fear of having a moment in the game where you don't know what to do, right? And I think that's where this like stems from, is whether it's like a rules thing or like, hey, what's the name of the tavern keeper? And you're like, shit, I don't know. And then you like the nervousness of what that might feel like if you've never been in that situation where they're like, hey, you're the one running the game. Can I do this? And you're like, I don't know. And that fear of like what that might feel like, you can just bing it. You can just bing it in the moment. You can ask the other players. Maybe you play with experienced players and other DMs who want the opportunity to be a player. I can speak from experience as a forever DM sometimes. Like, if somebody asks me to be a player, they want to try DMing, and they want, like, as the game is going, like, if there's ever a rule that they're not sure on, they can fall back on me or other people at the table. I am so happy to do that because it gives me a chance to be a player, and it's not a big deal for me. I don't like. Yeah, does it break a merge? I guess, but like, I kind of don't care. I'd rather just like, this is just a one-time game. You're asking about how sneak attack works. I'll tell you, you know, and then we'll go from there. If that's not what you're looking for, then that's a different story. Maybe you don't want the game to be broken up by me being like, oh, well, Spirit Guardians is actually a concentration spell that has a radius of and it hits at their turn. If you don't want that, then just let me know also, right?
Right.
But
yeah, and also getting into like the NPC stuff, like it doesn't matter if you don't know their name. It's so like my players know when they've got me in a hole when I whop out Stu. Like, oh yeah, this guy, what's his name? Stu. Just give a random name. It doesn't. The names really and honestly, unless they're major NPCs, don't particularly matter. And the funny ones, or you know, the ones that your characters like, you will, you know, you can kind of go from there. But like, it doesn't. The names for the most part don't super matter. The tavern names don't super matter. You know, if you don't, they're not necessary to the game to continue. You know, you can just say it's a tavern. What's the tavern's name? I don't know. It's got a sign on the front.
Yeah.
What? That's when you go, okay, well, I don't know. What is it named? And you throw it right back at the players.
I was just going to say that. Check. Yeah.
You throw it right back at them. Let them do some of the work.
Involve your players. Sometimes that's fun. Hey, let's come up with this. It's supposed to be collaborative storytelling, right? Doesn't get more collaborative than that. But yeah, I think it's an easy pitfall to fall into, especially when, like, as amazing as actual plays are and like spreading the game around and other TTRPGs, it can feel like a bar is being set for like the caliber of play or something like that. And it's like, if you're looking at Critical Role and you're like, oh my God, if I don't play as good as them and my games aren't as this intense, then it's not good. Then buddy, good luck going forward, because you're gonna have to crack a few eggs to make that omelet, mi amigo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
they didn't just wake up one morning.
They're professional voice actors. Like,
boom. From
the jump.
Yeah, there's so much work that went into that. Yeah.
Like, Laura Bailey plays young Gohan in Dragon Ball Z. Like, I don't want to hear it. Are you kidding me?
Right.
She's the GOAT. Anyway. There is nothing wrong with going into the game not knowing all the rules, every single possible scenario. I can tell you from experience, Taylor and I can both agree on this, when we did those class episodes recently, there were times when you would learn an ability and be like, what the hell? You can do that? Or like, we have our home game, Sword Coast Q.
Yeah.
The recaps are over on the Patreon. If you like listen to those, I'm making mistakes as we're playing these home games with years of experience. in the same game sometimes. Like, we've been playing the same game, same setting. It's not like oh, that's right, in this game we don't do flanking. Like, no, the same game for 3 years, still making mistakes. It happens. People bring up questions where you're like, damn, I've never even considered that. I don't know what the rule is. It's totally fine. Yeah. Not a big deal at all. You make the decisions. It's going to depend on how like much time you want to spend looking up a rule or something like that. You can literally just Bing it. If you're worried about like names in taverns and stuff, fantasy name generator, you can Bing like baby names or whatever. There's so many options. Bing is out there, man. It's gonna help you a ton in some of these.
It's out there. Just Binging around.
I always just type in like whatever the ruling is. So somebody says like, oh, can pass without trace stack with, I don't know, X, Y, or Z? And I just write pass without a trace and, I don't know, invisibility. And then I always add in 5E because obviously that's the system I'm looking for. Yeah. And then bing, bang, boom. I find something that looks reputable enough, or at least even sometimes it's just a springboard of my own ruling. I'm like, oh, I see a lot of people are saying X, Y, and Z. That's actually a good idea, and I'll use that. Whatever.
Yeah.
Just communication.
It's
always goes back to
you're
that.
not going to get it perfect on the first run, and that's okay. That's part of the experience.
Yep. Absolutely. All right.
So then I guess that's going to lead into our next point about like prepping. Like, I think a big common thing that DMs kind of do, I know that I've had trouble with in the past, is prepping either too much or prepping not enough, and like figuring out that pre-session prep kind of rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think another big common mistake, prepping the right amount, prepping what that works for you.
Yeah.
And that's going to look like different things for different people. Some people are like all about the improv and truly going right off the seat of their pants and like totally riffing. Yeah. And that's beautiful and amazing. And sometimes I wish I could do it more. I'm good at that as a player. For some reason, as a DM, it's something I not a weakness, but an area of opportunity, if you will.
Right. Let's keep it corporate.
I just got to make a few pivots. Next quarter, I'll be in it. I'll be hitting them quotas, baby. So I think for some people, it can be a mistake because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you want to run this game. What are your goals with that? Are you trying to run a game that's very funny and silly? Are you trying to run a game that's very by the rules? Maybe you don't know what kind of game you're trying to run necessarily. You're open. Mm-hmm. Some of those motivations, I think, have a certain amount of prep that will help in your ambition or whatever, right? Like if you're trying to go really by the rules and you're trying to like get a ton of details down, and that's what you want to do, and you're enjoying that aspect of DMing, then maybe read the material once or twice and like really even take some notes if you're into that. Like that's something I like doing. Like if I was running a pre-written module, I would read the book like 2 or 3 times. I would be like outlining it, like taking notes, but I enjoy that. Like that doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask because I like doing that. So if you don't like doing that and you're like, this feels like fucking homework, I hate this, then don't do that. But
yeah, it
could definitely help.
I think you should at least read it once before the session.
Yeah.
Minimum one time.
Yeah. I agree. I think that is huge. It can derail a game a little bit if you have to spend like 15 minutes looking for a specific thing or you're really harping on some stuff. I've had sometimes when like we go off the we like improv in the sense of, you know, a player will bring up a random location that wasn't planned. Hey, is there a blacksmith? And you're like, oh, I didn't plan for a blacksmith, but yeah, sure there is. That would make sense. And then the DM will spend way too long coming up with a name, like 15 minutes, because they want to get it perfect. And trust me, as somebody who like likes prepping and likes planning, the times that they come up with something that I didn't plan, I'm always like, dang, I wish I had more time to think of something like really good that I like really like or something like that. But sometimes looking for 20 minutes for a name is a bit much.
Yeah. Well, see, but that, I mean, yeah, so it's got to be one or the other. Like, either you've got a list of names that are ready to go that you can just kind of pull from as far as part of your prep, or like while you're playing, you're going to need like if you want the names to have the names, fantasy name generator or something open on the thing. Like it's got to be an either or, because that time lost is time that your players spend with the brains off of the table and out of it. And then the more time you spend in that place, it's a lot harder to wrangle everybody back in.
Yeah, definitely. And in that same light of not prepping enough necessarily to achieve the kind of goals you have for yourself in this fun little game, also you could prep too much. And I think that is in a couple different ways. One, it comes from like you're prepping 100 different things. You have all these different NPCs figured out, locations, possible plot hooks and stuff. And it's easy to fall into a little bit of like sorrow or like grief when you have to say goodbye to the 90% of world building that their players don't see or don't care about or don't explore or whatever. And like, you gotta just know that sometimes you did over prep a little bit much. Like the evil mage is at the bottom of the mountain at the core. Like, there's no reason for them to go on the other side of the planet because you planned every continent and all this stuff, you know?
Right.
So like, just being mindful of stuff like that. Prepping what you need to, and this is one of those things. Almost all of these like quote unquote mistakes, if you will, like can be helped with the idea of like experience. Like you're just gonna get better with this over time, you know. Like
yeah, and that's kind of what we were getting at with the first point. Is like you don't need to know everything. You're gonna get it. You're gonna get it eventually. Just keep at it.
Yeah, 100%. And you're gonna find out when it comes to prepping what works for you over time. You're going to figure out how much notes you end up taking during a session, and figuring out if you need to just prep the day of the game, a couple, like an hour before, 20 minutes before. Or are you the type that feels more comfortable and has more fun prepping a butt ton?
Right.
Because that's me, and I'm with you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I really do just like carrying a notebook with me all day and just writing down plans at every moment. So, that being said, kind of gets us into a logistical issue that very common to new DMs, and sometimes is an intentional move by more experienced DMs. Let's get into another common mistake, and that is overpowering the players. Yeah. This came up a lot on the socials. A lot of people mentioned this.
Right, and so I feel like our last point kind of leads into this one too, in a way, because in your prep, you're going to go through and you're going to find all these really dope magic items. They're so cool. They have so many cool abilities, and you're going to want to give them to your players because you're going to want to see what they do with them. Like, you're going to want to give them out. But then when you do that, it fundamentally breaks the game. Like, there's a reason why these are, like, if you look at them, these are, like, wondrous and legendary and all these different rarities that are, like, super, super rare, because a lot of them are very game-breaking abilities that come with it.
Yeah. Like, you give your players the luck blade that lets you cast wish. Like once a day or something.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Or even a deck of many things. I did that. I gave my players I gave them a whole deck. I gave them a whole deck, man.
That's a really... Yeah, deck of many things is a really solid example of underestimating how game-changing certain magic items can be. If you're in... Yeah, it's... So, like, the most obvious example for overpowering players, and the one that came up a ton in the comments, was specifically geared towards magic items. just like you've been talking about. And it's like sometimes it's specific individual magic items that are really, really powerful. Sometimes it's just too many. It's just a ton of magic items, which is fun. When you're a player, it's fun getting magic items. It feels really good. But sometimes it's like, I mean, you only have so many actions in the day, and now it just feels like literally any challenge that could arise, I am well equipped for. And I know exactly what I'm going to do because I have 16 go-go gadget items ready to go. You know what I mean? Like, it depends on the gameplay. I personally, I like there to be a little bit of a challenge. I like there to be like a good balance when I'm a player and when I'm a DM. I want there to be like times when things are easy and times when things are difficult as hell. You know? Yeah. If you're going for a game that's incredibly easy, then absolutely give out magic items. But just know that it scales things totally differently. Yeah. It makes the players much more powerful. They can overcome so much with certain magical item abilities. Their attacks, they can get spells. They have so many options. It's incredible. Another thing about magic items specifically is this is also one of those things that actually applies to a ton of parts of DMing. Magic items are going to feel so different in a one-shot compared to a campaign. Yeah. Because some items only get one use, and so you're going to have everybody using all of their magic items in a very concentrated period of time because they're like, well, I after this 3-hour session, I don't get this magic item anymore. So I might as well burn all of the charges and do all of the things. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you're playing a campaign and you have a wand of fireballs that has 7 charges, what's the likelihood that on the first combat you're going to burn all 7? Right. You know what I mean? Like, in a campaign, you'd be like, all right, I'll burn 1 or 2, save some in case something else pops up. But in a one shot, you're like, there's only an hour left.
And yeah, that reminds me of what my point was, is that if you give out too many items, magic items become mundane, and it's gonna be like your players are gonna lose engagement from that too. The fact that everything's too easy.
Yeah, for sure. And like also in a one shot specifically, it's one thing to let your players like start with a magic item or something like that, but if you're giving them a million magic items in the middle of a one shot, it can be a little tricky because there's like some mechanics involved with a lot of magic items. So you're giving them like something else to learn really quickly on the spot, unless they're really comfortable with the game and they like are familiar with some of the items or something. So something else to consider. And the other way of overpowering players, not just magic items, is also sometimes related to stats. I saw a comment or two like that on our TikTok. Yeah. And I think that just comes down to more so balancing, just like being able to balance combats and difficulty classes to fit with if everyone's rocking, like everybody has a 20, everybody has like an 18, and you're rocking some characters with some pretty strong stats, you know? Yeah, for me, I haven't had an issue with it. So it's always just been like, okay, well, if everybody can roll really well in what the things they're supposed to be good at, I can plan for that. Yeah. You know? Yeah. But that also comes with experience, like knowing what DCs are possible. Because it's easy sometimes to go into your first D&D game. You have a vague idea of the DCs, the difficulty classes. You know, like a 5 is something really, really easy. 10, not that hard. 15, pretty hard. 20, very hard. And then so on and so forth until you get to like 30s is like godlike, right? Yeah. You and I know that, but a new player, new DM might not have like a good grasp on that. So you come in and you think, oh man, a 13 is going to be really hard to hit at this level of play or whatever, and ends up not being that hard. And you're like, oh shit, okay, well, none of these locks are going to matter because I forgot that rogues get expertise and this person's crushing these thieves tools check. Right. So you just learn how to scale that back and just make it a little bit harder, knowing that there's a rogue in the group. You live and you learn.
Yeah, I feel like the stats thing is something that you can work around. Obviously, if you have players that are making characters with like 420s and you're like, dude, how? That's something
Yeah.
else that needs to be addressed. There's another underlying thing that needs to be addressed there. But for the most part, if you know what your
honesty.
party is, if you know what your players are supposed to be good at, I feel like stats generally are just a way to show that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can even come into like a lot of people were commenting things like putting too much value in the mechanics and just like the idea of getting really, really strict about that right off the bat and relying on it too heavily. So I think what they meant by that isn't necessarily because it is a game, like it's a storytelling technique and collaborative storytelling with the parameters that it is a game and there are certain mechanics that guide us through that story, the dice being one of them, right? And
Right.
relying on mechanics would be like every single time something happens, every single time a player says, hey, can I do this, or I'm gonna walk over to this person, asking for a dice roll, like every time. Does that make sense? Like sometimes it's like you don't need to ask for a dice roll to make a decision for literally everything. Sometimes you're allowed to just be like, yeah, let's let that happen because it's funny and I'm not going to hide it behind a roll.
Right.
Or let's let this happen because it's a genuinely good idea, and if they roll really low and it doesn't work, they're not going to have fun. Like not everything needs to be a dice roll, for example.
Yeah.
I think that's what they meant when they said relying on mechanics.
You're absolutely right. It doesn't all have to be, rolls in like, oh, well, you want to hop on the table and do a dance, make a athletics check or something like that. You can just climb up on the table. Yeah, no dancing for you because you're not.
It's like,
you
why
rolled
not?
a 2 on your athletics check. I'm sorry, my guy.
I'm sorry, no dancing for you.
No dancing. You can't dance on the
But I need
table.
to dance.
No, the table breaks
no.
as you climb up. You're on the ground now.
I run away, flailing my arms like Kermit the Frog, yelling, I am Kevin Bacon, and I shall dance. Footloose. Footloose.
Muppet Footloose.
Heck yeah, dude.
Anyway.
That's so funny. I just introduced a movie theater into Sphinx City.
Oh,
and
man.
Currently, the only things they're showing at the Sphinx City Cinema is a new director, a foreign director, is working on a series of projects, all of which are remakes of classic films where all of the characters are puppets except for one person.
Okay.
So they have, all the classics there. There's The Matrix, where everyone's puppets except for Morpheus. And then I'm trying to remember the other ones. I think there was have you heard of the movie P.S. I Love You?
I've heard
with
of
Hilary
it. I don't think I've
Swank and
seen it.
Gerard Butler. All puppets except for Gerard Butler. It's a very sad and romantic movie. Dramatic movie.
Yeah, I can tell.
It's the movie where like Gerard Butler's character passes away like after him and his wife and they're super in love and stuff, and he gets this disease and he's slowly dying, and he starts writing like letters for the future, kind of like after he passes. And so there's all these like flashbacks and like it's so sad and like romantic, and he helps her get over him dying. It's really, really intense. And so the idea of that being all puppets except for Gerard Butler's character who's like sending these letters to a puppet,
The one who dies.
to his puppet wife.
That
being like,
is
you have to move on.
absurd.
So funny. Anyway, that's a new location in Sphinx City. Oh, the other one was Jaws. Everyone but
Jaws.
Chief Brody.
But, okay. I was going to say everyone but the shark.
I thought that too.
Puppets.
But also, I think the idea of the shark being a puppet is really funny.
Also very funny.
To have Chief Brody be so
Also
scared.
absolutely
It eats
hilarious.
Captain Quinn. God, I love Jaws. All right, speaking of Jaws, let's get into scaling. Another common mistake by new DMs, scaling. You'll notice that at least the way this script was written by our brilliant scriptwriter. Thanks so much, Big Kath.
Stop.
Scaling, pretty general. We're thinking of a lot of different things here. For example, get into the first one. The idea of world building goes back to prep, goes back to a lot of different things. And the idea that you need to flesh out every single corner of your world before it's ready or good enough or anything like that. Like, you need every NPC named, every single location, every possible like eventuality that could occur, or all this different stuff. Like, hey, you don't have to. If you enjoy it and that's just like a fun hobby, is like building this world out, then I'm not going to stop you. That sounds dope. Go for it. You know? But don't feel like you have to. That's the tip.
Yeah, definitely keep it to the scale of where your campaign is at, honestly. Like, if you are planning, if you would like to do a long-running campaign, this, that, and the third, start with a town. Start with a building, like a tavern. Or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, start small. There's no need to have this giant big thing, because what if catastrophically this group of people that you were planning on running a long-term campaign with, what if that group breaks up after the first session? What if everybody hates playing with everybody? I don't want to put that bad juju out there on you, but it's a possibility of things that could happen. And then all this planning that you've done and all this kind of like world building and stuff that you've done is basically kaput until you find another set of players.
Yeah. And if you don't want that bad juju that Taylor just put on you, go check us out. We're on Twitch now, so you want to be a DM. We also have a Patreon. Check that out too. Links in the description. Hey, go click that link or you're going to get that bad juju.
I was wondering how you were going to get it, fit it into the episode here. That's good. That's good.
And so, yeah, world building is a big thing with scaling sometimes. I also think the idea of never having run a D&D game or being very fresh and new to it and being like, all right, now it's time for me to plan out a 2-3 year long campaign and go for it and all this stuff. Listen, when I was new to DMing, I started a multi-year campaign, but at the time didn't know that it was a multi-year campaign. And that's how it sometimes happens most often. Sometimes most often, that's how it happens. Yeah. I don't think that expression makes sense, but
60% of the time it works every time.
Every once in a while, every time, it happens exactly sometimes a little bit like that. So
no, but I do think that a lot of, because I didn't, honestly, the same with my long run campaign, is I kind of just planned on doing a couple of one shots and whatnot. I've had visions of grandeur and I had started this whole homebrew world thing, but honestly, I just kind of expected us to hang out for a couple of weeks and then everybody lose interest.
Yeah, you never know. And it's you can always, what I like to do, and this is just my own writing style and what works for me, so a little anecdotal, but I like to do a little bit of world building. I come up with an entire town, maybe very vaguely I'll come up with a country and 2-3 main towns, but very small, this one's a port town, this one's very agricultural, this city is a full-blown metropolis city. Boom, there's my world building. Right.
And there's nothing saying that you have to come up with all these from scratch either.
No.
There's resources out there to just have this stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's a big one too, is just the idea that you don't have to homebrew your first game. Or really, you don't have to homebrew any of your games. You can use pre-written modules. That is okay. There are third-party stuff out there if you don't want to support Wizards of the Coast. So many amazing things out there that use 5th edition. I highly recommend checking them out, whether it's drivethrurpg.com or dmsguild.com or whatever.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of DM's Guild.
Yeah, I have some stuff on there. Freaking Bing me, baby. Anyway.
Anyway.
What I was gonna say before though is when I'm thinking of like running a campaign or softly even just like outlining some world building, a campaign idea and this kind of stuff, I'll always like include in the very beginning a one shot, like, or a two shot in the very beginning, and have it written in such a way that if it ends after that, it still is like succinct enough to feel good, and it's not like in the middle of a thing. Right? Like it still sort of has an ending, but opens up the opportunity to continue into a campaign if it should go in that direction.
Right.
And sometimes schedules happen, campaigns break apart. That's going to happen. It's going to happen, and it sucks, and I'm sorry that it happened to you. It's sometimes has absolutely nothing to do with your performance or your like quality as a DM. It's just a difference of play style sometimes. It can be so many different things. Don't take it personally.
Yep. Find more players and keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking. Experience is going to be your best friend when it comes to getting better and better at this craft. It feels really hoity-toity to call it a craft.
The craft.
To get better at this. If you want to hone this craft of being a dungeon master for a Dungeons and Dragons game.
I mean, it fits.
It does
though,
fit.
you
I know
know
that it does, but it's just like that. I guess another for me. This again goes back to like my own. I also think a good tip for being a DM is not taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
You know, like your monsters are going to get killed most of the time, right? That's kind of the role that you are filling, is to be the loser sometimes. So like if you're taking yourself super seriously and you're like getting really annoyed and frustrated every time monsters get killed, or like you don't balance things correctly and you're just like really feeling beat up about it, like take a breath, think about why you got into the idea of DMing in the first place, and try and find the joy in the game again, whether that means taking a step back and being a player again and falling in love with it, and then try it again.
Yeah. That's what I did, for being 100% honest.
Yeah, preach about
it. I'm only just now coming back out of my DM shell that I huddled in for a year and a half.
Yeah.
2 years.
Speaking of you being a DM, another idea of scaling is maybe not doing a level 15 one shot right off the bat and letting Kraken Druids happen. Scaling.
Yeah, no, scaling is important. You got to know what your players are capable of, and the best way to do that is to start them out as babies.
Start them out as babies.
Babies. You get the baby players first.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get to that high level play, you'll also be a high level DM.
Yeah. Definitely.
Because it's a hand-in-hand thing, because you'll know how your players are going to react to stuff. You're going to know what kind of abilities and stuff that they have, what you need to be on the lookout for, all that, and this, that, and the third. And then it makes that high-level play feel like high-level play instead of, your players going on a stomping mission with a Kraken.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, high-level play with D&D 5th edition is a different animal. It just is. Like, even myself, who I love this system. Like, I really do enjoy 5th edition a ton. However, some of the high-level play, maybe I disagree with some of the design. And we'll kind of leave it at that. I think it could use some work. It gets crazy what players are capable of doing. Borderline gods.
Yeah, and that's, I think, kind of important when, just while we're kind of talking about it, a good side mechanic other than combat is a very good way to make high-level play feel high-level.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of extra mechanic, like the water's rising in the thing, and you've got to figure out the puzzle while fighting the big bad, or you're going to drown type of deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Give them the big thing of high level play is action economy, and if you can strip your players of their action, it changes so much.
Yeah, definitely. But if you're a new DM and you're like, this is your first or second time, honestly, don't go higher than like 5th level. Don't you dare.
Yeah.
It's the only tip I think in this whole episode where I'm gonna be pretty hardcore steadfast about that. If it's your first or second time GMing, I really don't think you should go above 5th level. I kind of don't care what your reasoning is. I think it's just better to try a one shot at a lower level.
Yeah.
You're gonna learn so much. Anyway, that I think gets into our final and some may say most important.
Yeah, I would say.
Most important common mistake that new DMs tend to have is a lack of patience and forgiveness. And most of that should be pointed inwards.
Yeah.
The idea that you should have patience with yourself.
Love yourself.
Treat yourself.
Yeah.
You should have patience with yourself
and
be able to forgive yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're not a Bria Iyengar. You're an early DM. That's okay. You're allowed to make mistakes.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot at first. And, just love yourself.
Yeah. We're here to have fun. That is the most important thing.
I feel like that's life advice. Right. Yeah, that's like life advice. It's just love yourself. Like, but really, it's hard out there, man. This is a game. There's no reason.
Yep, I hear you, dude.
Yeah, it's just be forgiving of yourself that mistakes happen, and it's not always going to be a mechanical ruling mistake. It's going to be, maybe your friend got super offended about something that happened at the table. Like, that's going to happen too. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just be patient with yourself and, address whatever the problem is and move forward, learn from it.
Yeah. Learn from it. Do better next time. That's all you can do sometimes. And, that you're also going to have like people who've been playing D&D forever do something like that, and to them I would say the same thing. Just learn from your mistakes and do better and move on.
Yeah.
And it's like, when it comes to being a new DM specifically, we've harped on it a million times. More than anything else, all of these things take experience, and you just get better at it. Like, so a lot of this isn't like so innate that they can't be improved upon. You can get better at different things. Right. And a lot of this also stems from the idea of like finding out what you enjoy about all of the things that a dungeon master does, including also the game itself. Like, right. What do you like? And maybe you know that going in because you have experience with video games, so you like the numbers and the leveling up and the stats and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you're coming in from an improv, storytelling, acting, theater background, so you're here for the storytelling. So maybe you have some preconceived idea of what you're going to like about the game. Maybe you're coming in fresh. Whatever that may be, have an open mind for what the game can offer in the different play styles and storytelling styles and stuff. You never know what'll happen. And then eventually you'll start to really have a better understanding of some self-awareness, sort of being like, you know what? I actually think this game is too crunchy. This game is just crunchy enough. This game doesn't have enough crunch or whatever it is that works for you,
This game is too crunchy. This game is just right.
Papa, there's a girl playing my TTRPG. She's got golden hair. Goldilocks, you get the hell out of here. Why are you breaking into our house, Goldilocks?
Don't get
it. You can't. So, yeah, I guess like it's important to know, and if you're like following us on social media or listening to the podcast, you probably already know our sentiments on this. But the idea is that like different people play, even if you just consider Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, because there are other TTRPGs that exist and they worked it a little differently in a number of ways. But even just sticking to this one TTRPG, different people play it differently. Some people are going to love combat, getting down nitty gritty about rules and combos and like, well, if I use this spell at this level and then bonus action sorcery point and then also this ability, like that's some people, that's their shit and that's dope. And other people are like, oh, I just think of the rules a little bit as guidelines. And other people are like, what rules?
Yeah.
And that's fine too, if that's what you and your table have agreed upon. Communication, baby.
Right. Communication. You got to talk to your players. What are the expectations for the table as far as rules and all of that, you know? Because everybody plays differently, sometimes people who play differently at the same table maybe don't have a clear expectation of what the game's supposed to be like. And so one of them is not happy. Or vice versa. I don't know. It's
yeah. It's easier.
You gotta talk to
and
people.
It's straight up a little bit. Straight up a little bit. I keep doing that. I keep having all these oxymorons. Jumbo shrimp.
Government intelligence.
So what was I gonna say? Oh fuck! I did what you did last time.
Yeah. You had a point, and it just did.
Oh,
goodbye.
here it is. It came back. I got it. It's going to be easier and nicer for you and your players if you are proactive rather than reactive when it comes to shit like that. I keep getting into what feels like a lot of corporate talk. I swear I'm not doing it intentionally.
Mm-hmm. No, but that's a really good point though. It is. You want to do as much as you can in that session 0 as far as setting expectations as you can.
Yeah. It just is so much nicer to be able to ahead of time be like, "Hey, in this game we're going to be a little strict about rules. Therefore, if you say I'm going to do X, Y, and Z and you technically can't, I'll bring it up if it sounds cool enough in the moment, whatever, but like I might shut it down."
Right.
And that's okay. We're learning, we're trying to figure it out and da-da-da. Or you can let players know the opposite is true, where you're like, "Hey, don't correct another player because you know that technically that's a bonus action spell or whatever. Like, it's cool. We're just going to run with it. That's not the vibe of this game." So, but if everyone's on the same page, then at least they know.
And yeah, but exactly. That's the big thing. Is like, as long as everybody's on the same page and having fun, then it's cool. You know, the big problem is having multiple players come into a game with different expectations. Once that happens, there's going to be no way to keep everybody at the table happy.
Yeah. Unless one of them is extraordinarily flexible, which can happen, but don't bet on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, so there's always going to be different ways that people play the game, and better to let people know in advance than to spring it on them, right? Don't assume everybody wants this amazing surprise. Surprise! Remember I said make level 15 characters? Actually, you're level 1. What? What the hell? If you had told me, I would have been like, okay, we start out as really powerful and we lose all our powers in the beginning. That's cool. I'm in for it. You know, I'm instantly like, that's such an interesting idea. I'm in for it. But at least I know. And then I can pretend to be surprised. It's fine. I'm the character surprised. Whatever.
Oh no. Right. But yeah, no, that would not be cool. If I went into a campaign thinking, or like even like a one-shot thinking it was going to be a level 15 one-shot, and I found out it was like a level 3 one-shot.
Yeah. A little bummed.
I'd be pretty upset.
For sure, at least.
I'd be a little upset.
So,
if it went down to level 1, I'd get up and walk out of the table. I'd walk out.
Yeah, there's definitely a breach.
There's a line right there.
A breach of agreements going on there. A lawyer needs to be called.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get into, before we close out, just really quickly, there's some honorable mentions of different common DM mistakes. I don't want them to fall by the wayside. Some of which we've managed to work into the things we previously talked about. But I'll run through these pretty quickly. Other possible mistakes. Thinking that you have to do homebrew only and not a pre-written module. Super valid.
I love modules.
Hey, somebody's homebrewing them, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, who knows? Maybe So You Want to Be a DM will come out with some pre-written homebrew modules.
Hey,
you know, keep a freaking lookout.
Maybe.
Next one, hiding important things behind roles. That one's huge. If it's a huge plot point, don't hide it behind a DC roll, because what if they roll low? Now they're never going to move the story forward. Mm-hmm. If it's important to your story, to the fun, to your characters.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hide it behind a roll, or make it like give there a reason that even a nat 1 would succeed, because you have to always account that they might get a nat 1.
Right. I always want to fail forward if nothing else.
Yeah, definitely. Even like asking for too many rolls or not enough rolls could be one. We talked about too many rolls where you're just like every single little thing. It's like eventually the player's going to be like, oh my God, can I step forward with my left foot? You're like, roll the dice. It's insane.
Deck save, please.
But also, it can be a mistake, depending on the table. It can be a mistake not to ask for enough rolls. Sometimes the player is not going to, like, I know for me personally, like, I'm not the type of person to be like, can I make a persuasion check?
Yeah.
That's not my play style, right? I don't ask for checks.
Right.
I just do behaviors that I kind of hope will elicit checks. But if I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to walk over to this person and I'm going to lie to his face and say, oh, I'm actually the king's right-hand man and you can trust me. And then the DM just says like, all right, sure. Like, yeah, I believe you. And it's like, oh, I kind of wanted to make a deception check there, you know?
Yeah.
And like if that happens a ton, especially like in one-shots and shorter things, you're like, gee, why did I put expertise in this?
Right.
I'm never rolling the dice. Like it is part of the game. Some people are here for that part of it. So
yeah, definitely the rolling dice. I know I like rolling my shiny math rocks. I enjoy it a lot. I have so many, and I want to use them all.
Heck yes. Another one. Just the idea of maybe not being a player a couple times, or even running like a slightly less rules heavy game first.
Yeah.
I saw this comment a couple times. The idea that like if you run, here's how I kind of interpret it is like, because a couple people were like, oh, maybe you should run a different game first, like a less rules heavy game. And I think it's interesting advice in the sense that like I get where they're coming from, but like if you as the potential new DM are genuinely set on D&D 5th edition to be the game that you want to run, I don't think it should be a prerequisite that you have to run another game, like a different system.
Right.
But I can fully recognize that there is inherent, like a benefit to that. Like if you have experience with other TTRPGs, it will help you when it comes to D&D 5th edition, just by the very like osmosis of some of those skills, right? Like I was playing a ton of video games, so when I started learning about D&D, a lot of it just clicked, because of like the osmosis effect of like some of those skills just transferred over. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like that's going to happen. That's super true. But if you're really set on D&D 5th edition for one reason or another, it's okay to start here.
Yeah, it definitely is. If you're able to be a player at least once beforehand, it does amazing things.
Helps a ton.
For your mentality as a dungeon master.
1,000,000%. I definitely agree that you should play one game with at least like an experienced GM or something like that, like a pretty experienced GM.
Yeah, it's not necessary, but it is something that is very helpful.
Yeah, just because I mean, like you're gonna get a feel for it. You're gonna get a feel for the game and pacing and combat and all the potential different things in it. I think it makes a lot of sense to be a player first because you're only controlling that one character. So it is like the natural inclination or the natural pipeline to dungeon masters.
Right.
But that's one. Yeah. Another one, holding too tight to the plot. Like being really, really like railroady to like.
Sorry.
Oh no, go. I was just saying.
All right, I'm gonna shut up. You make your point.
Okay. The idea that you're like, we use railroad most of the time between you and I to mean more like there's guidelines. Like we know the A and the B, how you get there is kind of whatever, but even that is like slightly railroading. It's not too crazy. Whereas some people view railroading as like hardcore. There's zero player agency. You have to do X, Y, and Z and all these different things. And I think when I read holding too tight to the plot, That's what I think of is being
yeah.
and also like beginning to feel bad that the players aren't following
Doing
the
what
clues that you think that they should do.
Right. I think that this comes as a symptom of over prep. I think when you prep so much that you have all of these things that you want your players to see and do. The fact of the matter is, the harsh truth of the matter is that your players don't think like you do. They're not going to want to, I mean, not saying that they're not going to want to do these things, but they're not going to think of these things. So you feel like you have to make them do the things, you know, like, oh, well, I made this really funny NPC in the store, but you know, they don't really feel like shopping or anything right now. Okay, well, you have to go to the store because one reason or the other. Like, just to get that one NPC in, just put them in a bag, save them for later.
Yeah, absolutely. Recycle, reuse, recycle. The next one we already talked about, relying too heavily on mechanics. We talked about that. That's kind of like just the idea of rolling too often, or also like taking those 30-minute breaks to figure out the exact ruling of a complicated rules question, you know?
Yeah.
Or like preventing your own or the table's fun by depending on a rule and being like, yeah, this is the rule, but it doesn't really make sense. Don't sweat it. Like if changing the rule in the moment allows you and your table to have more fun, heck yeah, flippin' do it. I wish we could do that with our government's rules. Anyway, the other one, saying yes too often.
This is
the idea that like this the age old secret of like, or secret I should say, the age old myth that in order to be a good DM, never say no.
I say no all the time. All the time.
Sometimes you got to say no, and that's okay.
There is a line. There's a limit. You know, there is a distinct like physics of the world, so to speak, that like certain things you just no, you cannot do that. No, you cannot ride on that little beetle or whatever the hell. I don't know. I was trying to think of something.
It's too small.
It's way too small. No, absolutely not.
What is this, made for ants?
Right. right. That was
the DM's like, yes,
at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, that is a mount for ants. That beetle mount is not for humanoids. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're allowed to have physics in your game that has magic and stuff like that, and different expectations. And of course, there's going to be times when saying yes does feel like the best option, and saying no feels bad, or whatever it may be. You get better with that kind of stuff and understanding when to say yes, when to say no, with experience and learning about yourself and your own like boundaries, I guess.
Right.
And also, like, I like the idea of, you know, the classic improv yes and then there's the no but.
Yeah.
So like there's a difference between just straight up shutting somebody down and saying no, but I'll work with you.
Right.
Let's find a compromise. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's definitely something. I think in one of the taverns we worked in, or not a tavern, but it was an inn. I think it was, it's a classic example of the no but. And they had a continental breakfast I'd like worked in with like the scrambled eggs and the sausage, and like, oh, well, did they have cereal? Or something along the lines of, it wound up being no, like, do they have milk? Well, yeah, but it's like super old. It's been sitting out all day. There's no ice. It's like the Middle Ages, so it's just kind of old hot milk out there. So you can take with that how you want it. I don't know. It's silly gag.
It is silly.
Continental breakfast
silly.
In the new, or the whatever medieval times inn, ye olde inn.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to give them hot milk. Because the only thing that can wash out the terrible flavor of hot milk is tap water, baby. Big tap coming at you coming at you live.
Okay,
Big
so
tap.
that's all we can get into this time.
Water in your house.
You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Soyouwannabeadm, or you can ask us a question at soyouwannabeadm@gmail.com. If you like the episode, don't forget to give us 5 stars and a review wherever you found us. And check out our Patreon with the link in the description. Join us next time for more Dungeon Master tips and tricks.
Bye. And now it's time to shout out our Patreon gang. We got Theo R in the Adult Dragon Gang. And in our Ancient Dragon Gang, we have Lee from the UK, who we can't wait to roll dice with. And if you want a shout out, you got to get at least in the Adult Dragon Gang, people. Okay? See you for the next episode of So You Want to Be a Dungeon Master.